A community-driven fresh food access program is spreading its roots to food deserts across Louisville. Karen Moskowitz, whose passion for food justice led her to found the New Roots Project, joins me to talk about how she's helping to bridge food quality disparities in mostly low-income minority neighborhoods. That's now on Connections. Thanks for joining me today for Connections. I'm Renee Shaw. I'm glad to welcome to the show today Karen Moskowitz, whose passion for food justice led her to develop a program called New Roots, as well as introducing the Fresh Stop model to Louisville. Committed to organizing and connecting underserved residents with local farmers and other food justice leaders, Karen's project is taking root elsewhere in addressing food quality disparities plaguing minority and largely low-income communities. Karen, it's so nice to have you back, I'll say. You were on the other set that's just across the way back in November, I guess it was, for our Health 360 series, where we talked about community advocates like yourself who just really have taken up the baton to do great things in their community. And so I was so impressed with you then. I said, I want a half an hour just to talk with you about all the great things you're doing in Louisville. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me back, Renee.
Yes. So now is the perfect time. A lot of us, if we don't really eat very much fresh fruits and vegetables from October to May, we tend to really dig in from June to September. And you really are taking advantage of this time of good harvest to help some people who are, quite frankly, in food deserts in Louisville and Jefferson County area. So tell us about what the New Roots Project is and what you're doing there.
Right, so the New Roots Fresh Stop Project connects families with affordable farm fresh food, and we also share knowledge on home cooking, and we inspire community leaders to help people transform their lives.
Yeah.
And we created the Fresh Stop Project because of the lack of fresh food in neighborhoods in Louisville. And the Fresh Stop Project is community driven, and families can pool their money and SNAP benefits, which is food stamps, to be able to buy case quantities from Kentucky farmers. On a sliding scale, so higher income people paying more than lower income people, and they're able to share in the bounty of local produce.
Yes, and so now is the bounty, right?
That's
I know
right.
that it hasn't been, it's been kind of an odd season, and not just where you all are, but across the state we're hearing, because, you know, the lingering frost, and we had those cold snaps, and so things are kind of coming in slower than usual. So I guess, how is that affecting how your commerce, for the lack of a better word?
Right, so, you know, the local food system in Kentucky is still growing. It's fairly new, our transition from tobacco farming to food that we can eat, to produce. So we had a little bit of a slow start. We were able to catch the strawberry season.
Oh, wonderful.
Which was wonderful. We were able to purchase 250 gallons of fresh strawberries from Van Meter Farms in Clarkson, Kentucky.
Nice.
And connect families in West Louisville with those strawberries at a big strawberry jam festival.
Oh, nice.
We had in West Louisville back in May. I would say the season's about 2 weeks behind usual, but we're hitting blueberry season.
Yes.
Tomorrow we're going picking. We've had some issues getting some of the earlier crops then. We've had some issues with bugs and lost our radish and turnip supply, and we've been shopping around. So, but we're excited about the season, and hopefully we'll be able to go later then.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Maybe if you start later, then you can end later.
That's right.
So where do you find these farmers, and are they really close to the Jefferson County area, or are they spread out?
Well, it's really it's a work of art finding the right farmer for a Fresh Stop. We look for farmers who have a very diverse portfolio. That is, they work not only on a wholesale level, a retail level, but mostly we're looking for farmers who are used to working in bulk quantities.
Right.
And we find them by networking at farmers markets. We also, we will ask farmers that we work with if they know anybody. We generally source from about a 50-mile radius from Jefferson County, but we do go beyond when we have to Meade County, Kentucky, for example. We go into southern Indiana for peaches. So anywhere that we are able to access really beautiful fresh food at affordable prices, we'll go and source. And the other thing is we depend on the farmers to drop off the food. We don't ourselves have transportation, so farmers do we need farmers who can drop off at the Fresh Stop locations themselves. Sometimes we meet them halfway.
Right, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because that would be a lot. And they have the equipment and means to carry that kind of load.
Exactly.
Yeah, so how many farmers, do you have a number of how many farmers?
We work with 20 farmers right now, and it's growing. For example, we're starting to talk to a group of African-American farmers down near Bowling Green who work together, a group of 6 farmers. So we're expanding, and we're always looking. Sometimes because food, especially fruit, is very expensive, we'll have to go pick ourselves, like with the blueberries or blackberries. But mostly we depend on...
That's fun exercise.
Oh, we love it.
And to take kids who've probably never, ever had that experience before.
We always make sure that kids come along, and they do have a very eye-opening experience, that the blueberries were not born on the grocery store shelf or in the factory.
In the nice container. That's that there's actually labor before it gets there. Yeah.
Yes, and of course we eat a lot while we're picking.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you said, these farmers have to be, you know, they're in wholesale market, but they also do larger quantities, because this is quite a bit. I mean, you've got a lot of families who are participating in this program, and it's growing and growing each year. So how many families now do you have on the rolls, so to speak?
So this season, we have about 200 families, 250 families participating in 4 Fresh Stops. And we have one of our Fresh Stops in Old Louisville, the 4th Avenue United Methodist Church Fresh Stop. It was is our oldest Fresh Stop, entering its 5th season. And they have a waiting list now. They've reached about 83 families, and they said that's enough for them, because it's a volunteer-driven project, and we don't want to overwhelm the volunteers.
Right.
And in West Louisville, in the Shawnee Fresh Stop, and in the new Shively Wellington Elementary School-based Fresh Stop, we are also nearing capacity up to almost between 60 and 80 families.
That's remarkable.
Every Fresh Stop. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so that's the interesting thing, is that you've really partnered. I know you're the leader, but you really do rely on these churches and other community organizations, and now you've got a school involved to really help do some of this organizing too. It's not, you can't be everywhere at all these different Fresh Stops.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how often do these Fresh Stops happen? During the course of the summer?
Happen depending on the Fresh Stop. All the Fresh Stops are somewhat autonomous, and so they make their own decisions on how often to meet. 4th Avenue, for example, meets every week, and West Louisville meets every other week, and Shively meets once a month. And this is while the school's out. And when school comes back in Jefferson County, we may up it to twice a month. So, and depending on how often they meet, they get bigger or smaller shares.
Right.
And a share is what we call a basket of produce, because everybody shares the same amount and variety of produce. Whatever we're able to get in season, we buy.
Right. And so no one gets more than the other, right? They may pay differently because of their income.
Exactly.
But they don't get to take more than, and typically we're talking about a household that maybe has 2 to 4 people. Is that pretty much what the serving size would be?
Exactly. So we have some families that will order 2 shares, for example, if they have 6 to 8 people. We have one family with 8 children, for example, at our Wellington Fresh Shop, so they have 2 shares that they bring home. But it's enough, and it lasts too. This food is picked the morning of the Fresh Stop, and the quality is just so wonderful, and it lasts a long time in the fridge. So, but you tend to start to eat vegetable for breakfast when you're part of the Fresh Stop, because you have so many vegetables that you say, well, I really do need to eat these all day long to be able to get through this share.
And I know you offer other classes, and when we actually talked about those when we did the Health 360, and I would encourage our viewers to go back and watch that program that's online, because that really gave a great synopsis of what the New Roots Fresh Stops is. But that you have these folks from all over that come. It's not just, even though the role is really to give these low-income food deserts access, but you've told me that you've had business people come and participate. So you're really doing more than just the food access. You're also doing community building and kind of tearing down some bridges that we have because of socioeconomic and other status.
Exactly, Renee. So this is the beauty of the Fresh Shop. You just don't know who's going to walk in the door.
Yeah.
It could be anybody. At the Shawnee Fresh Stop, for example, we have 75% low income from the neighborhood, 25% higher income from other neighborhoods, or sometimes from within the neighborhood. And we depend on the higher income families to help subsidize the lower income families. And everyone is welcome. So you're right, you just don't know who you're going to meet. And it's one of these projects that you don't see that often in a city like Louisville, where we have a lot of barriers and segregation on the ground. And so all kinds of people getting together, and the key is we are sharing food and sharing food stories. Everybody eats. Everybody loves to eat who comes to a Fresh Stop. It's a very positive atmosphere. You have people just very happy to be there because they're looking, the food is very aesthetically beautiful. They get to taste what our chef is cooking. They get to share stories. And a lot of the people who are coming to Fresh Stops have spent the spring months with us in our food justice leadership development classes. And so they've gotten to know each other ahead of time in those classes. And that's why they're super motivated to be leaders in the project. And we really depend on leadership to drive the Fresh Stops. Because like you said, we don't have any full-time paid staff members at New Roots, at the nonprofit organization. And so this is the way that we have figured out to get fresh food to low-income families without a big budget.
And I think that is one of the other components that I applaud, is that the fact that you do have these other leadership development classes where they actually learn, you know, why it's important to eat locally grown food.
That's right.
And what it does to your body, and the fact that you know the people who are growing the food. Other than it being some big, you know, manufacturer somewhere, that it's all processed. And we'll talk a little bit about the processed nature. But how does this kind of jive with farmers markets? I guess many people might be thinking, what's the difference between what a farmer's market would do or a food truck would do? How is this different?
Well, we have had a very difficult time in Jefferson County convincing farmers to come and set up farmers markets in the food desert neighborhoods, in the lower income neighborhoods. And every market pretty much that we tried to set up has failed because the farmers were able to make more money and have more consistent clientele over in the higher income neighborhoods. So the way that it's different is this project depends on everyone paying ahead of time. So when we collect money and food stamps from families, it's always at least a week ahead of time. Then we're able to call the farmers, and it's not just me calling the farmers. We have community members who are assigned to different farmers to form relationships. And they call the farmers, they're able to spend the community's money, and it's decided on a kind of consensus basis where we're going to spend the money and on what. And they're able to call the farmers and guarantee that we are going to spend a certain amount. So when the farmer comes in to drop off the food, there's no risk. So we've overcome the barrier of this risk that farmers are facing by coming into lower income neighborhoods, by growing, picking, driving, and then they're not selling everything. And so it's a beautiful model. I mean, some people might not like the fact that they don't get to pick a particular variety or amount. But when you compare that to the fact that we get a large amount of produce in every basket for a very affordable price, people get used to it, and it encourages them to try new products they might not grab, like a turnip.
Like a turnip or a radish, as I was talking about before we started our conversations. Like, I don't know, but you said these are sweet.
And the food is beautiful.
Yeah, and I guess that's really good, too, for folks who, you know, have been in food deserts, and even the children who maybe never seen a turnip, to explore that and to think, you know, if I try it, I really just might like it.
That's right.
And to kind of retrain the taste buds a little bit to desire the more healthful option than the less helpful option.
Exactly. When it's abundant, when it's affordable, when it tastes good, the children will tend to want to eat more of it. And also when they come out to the farm and they're able to dig in the dirt and in their farms that we work with and the community gardens. We've been partnering with Food Literacy Project. This is an on-site farm experiential education farm in Jefferson County. And some of the children who are working with the Wellington Elementary School Fresh Stop have had those experiences out on the farm. So there's a long then connection and demand that we're building for Kentucky produce.
That's wonderful.
Starting at a very young age.
Yeah, where did you get this idea from?
So this idea came from Cleveland, Ohio. We had leaders before us in Cleveland at City Fresh who started the Fresh Stops, it's probably 7 years ago. And I had heard about the project and wanted to bring it in Louisville. I was mentored by some of their leaders. We've changed the model slightly. We focus much more on leadership development and volunteer-driven Fresh Stops than City Fresh. They do most of the distribution themselves. They have trucks and do that distribution. And we had decided early on that we wanted the model to be community-driven. And the other thing is we're able to attract a much higher percentage of low-income families and leaders to our project than they have because of that focus on leadership development. So we went into this with eyes wide open, knowing that we needed to do something a little different. Part of the challenge was we weren't able to secure funding like they did at the very beginning. They had a very large USDA grant that we did not get. And so we had a sort of necessity created our drive for leaders, and I think it really worked out beautifully. And
yeah, because even though families contribute, there's got to be some kind of overhead costs here that you're incurring to do all of this organizing. So how are you able to sustain in that way?
Right, so we are dependent right now for some of the overhead costs on grants and also small and large donors. And we are now trying to brainstorm with our board and other community members how we can make this more sustainable, how we might be able to get sponsorship, for example, from some companies that have like-minded missions. Maybe there's some healthcare companies, for example. We have a small grant from Humana Foundation this year, a pretty large grant from Norton Foundation, Brown-Forman, and so we're starting to reach out in the community and get some sponsorships.
Because I would think that they would see the health benefits for them being providers, that this may be cutting costs.
Exactly.
In the long term, if you give people, you know, healthier eating options, and perhaps it curbs all the chronic disease that riddles low-income areas because they haven't had the access to the food before, that they actually might see a difference in their bottom line. And I'm sure they're thinking about that.
That's the thinking. We've been partnering a lot with Kentucky One Health, and exactly, I mean, they see childhood obesity, especially, as very expensive. It's almost $2.4 billion a year in the state of Kentucky just to pay for all the illness created by overweight and obesity. And we have about a third of the children in Kentucky in that category of being overweight or obese. So it's getting very expensive, and it's also it's a moral issue, it's an ethical issue that they're very, I feel like with some new needs that they're going to have to attend to from the new Obamacare coming to Kentucky. They're going to have to look at this a lot deeper than they have been, and so they're looking to partner with organizations like New Roots.
It's a good opportunity for you all to do that as well. Good timing. Yeah. When we think about the chronic disease, and if you're tracking the health success of the program, I mean, how do we know? I've had LaQuandra Nesbitt on, who is over the health department there, about, you know, she's always results oriented. You know, outcomes is what she wants to see, and she will say that within 5 years, if a program hasn't shown, you know, good, transformative, sustainable, irrevocable results, you need to change course. So how do you know it's working? Other than just everyone maybe feels good about eating better, are you having those health benefits being returned in some way?
Right.
How are you evaluating that?
Well, we use different metrics to determine success. So we have some hardcore metrics that Dr. Nesbitt might like. For example, we are going to be tracking actually BMIs, which is body mass index. If we secure funding from a grant that we are partnering with Kentucky One Health and Food Literacy Project starting in August, and we would be working with an elementary school that has very high rates of obesity in their children. It's 33%. And then we would finally be tracking BMIs and waist circumference. Right now, because we don't have really the staff or the ability to do the kind of tracking that we really need to do health-wise, we track other sorts of statistics like the amounts of fresh foods and fruits and vegetables that people eat before the Fresh Stop, and then we post-survey after the Fresh Stop. And we see last year an 85% rate of return of people saying, yes, we are eating more fruits and vegetables. And we do stop eating fruits and vegetables when the Fresh Stop stops. Which because the taste of the local food has created this drive for taste that they can't seem to get in the conventional produce. So we've been trying to think of ways to spread the produce out over the whole season by acquiring space for a root cellar and storage to be able to buy early on some of the winter crops. So, and
maybe to have canning classes, or, you know, how to freeze and prepare, because a lot of us think that, you know, once after 5 days it's no good, you know, you'd throw it away. But there, you know, I'm from the South, and so we did canning and freezing. That was just a big part of growing up, and so maybe that's a way to kind of get that to go all over around.
Yes, we're going to have a canning class in August at the Wellington Fresh Stop. We also have a leader there who loves to freeze dry and dry her fruits, and she's an expert in that, so she'll teach us how to do that. And
do you have a good turnout for those classes?
We do. You know, it depends on the topic, you know, but generally it ranges from about 10 to 30 people who come to the food justice classes. And
those are free.
And they're free. They're in the evening after work, and we don't have much of a marketing budget, so everything is Facebook or word of mouth.
Right, which works just as well these days, you know?
That's right.
I think it really does, Yeah, so talk about the community support. I mean, I'm sure not just in the communities that you serve, Shawnee or Portland area, but other communities have to be taking notice that what are they doing there? And how can we help?
Right. Well, it's interesting. So we have a waiting list of 6 neighborhoods who would like to have a Fresh Stop in their neighborhood, but they're just presently new routes. We don't have the resources.
Right.
So the way we're looking at this is when neighborhoods have the feel to have a Fresh Stop, we invite them to a Fresh Stop during the season so they're able to see what it really takes and to learn from our leaders. So we have people shadowing at this point, and then we start to do our outreach now to try to look for funding and try to look for leaders in the other neighborhoods. And we're hoping to spread into South Louisville. We're right now in Southwest Louisville at Wellington. We hope to spread into the Taylor Boulevard area where we have a lot of new immigrants and refugee populations who have not been that separated from fresh fruits and vegetables, are used to sort of purchasing in markets. And so that's what we're hoping for 2014. We've also spread to other cities. We have a Fresh Stop in Washington, D.C., and a second one starting this season, and we have one starting in Indianapolis this Saturday.
And so are you the one who's coordinating all of this?
Well,
how are you doing all that?
Well, it's funny. I get phone calls all the time, and I'm able to help as much as I possibly can. You know, I don't have that much time. I have to focus on Louisville, but I am able to give some advice and some feedback, and then pretty much the leaders in that community will kick off the Fresh Stop themselves, but I'll get phone calls throughout the season with questions, and I'm just really impressed with it's the thing is once you learn the basics, you know, and you have the passion, and you have the shareholders who have the passion with you, it's very possible to do on a very low budget.
I think that's just wonderful. Well, congratulations to you on that burgeoning success that you're having. Is it also sparking perhaps folks to say, oh, I might grow tomato plants or have my own little, you know, I know that maybe they don't have the lot size to grow a big garden, but you maybe do a patio garden or a little community garden. Are you seeing more of that because of what you're doing with New Roots Fresh Stop?
Absolutely. In fact, it inspired me. I planted a whole row of vegetables in my plot next to my house in the original Highlands. And we do see that. We do see people planting wherever they can. Even if you live in an apartment, you could have a pot of basil. We also have some of our members going to community gardens in the area and planting. But we also have a lot of elderly people or people who are disabled who might not be able to, might want to in their minds. And so they're just very glad to have the Kentucky farmers grow for them. But definitely I do see people becoming more curious about planting a seed and seeing if they could grow a plant.
When we talked to you back when Laura Kruger did the field piece we did for Health 360 that kind of launched our conversation last year about what you're doing, you had mentioned in there that, you know, it used to be that 50% of what we ate came from Kentucky farms, and now I think I heard you say less than 1%?
It's true.
Is that true?
It is true. But what an opportunity, right? And so we became a commodity farm state with tobacco and soybeans and corn, and it has a lot to do with the Farm Bill and the subsidies that go to just 5 major crops, you know, like the soybeans and corn. So the local food system in Kentucky, we've had to give rebirth to that, and the Tobacco Settlement Fund, House Bill 611, that was spearheaded by Community Farm Alliance back in the I guess in the early 2000s, right?
1997, 98, 99.
Right, late 90s, we were able to have some funding behind this transition for farmers, and so
to diversify.
But so the trick for us, because we do have so many people now and our demand is so big, is to try to keep up, the farmers to keep up with us, and the supply and demand to be keeping up with each other.
Right.
And so sometimes we have a hard time. And but what it takes is a commitment up front from us, from the community, and to say to a farmer, we will buy from you. And so we have to put ourselves out on the line. Sometimes when we start a Fresh Stop, we don't know. I mean, we think, we hope, we want it to be successful. We do everything we can with our community organizing outreach plan to make it so. But until that day,
how do you know?
We don't know. So, but it has never been where we've made a commitment and have not had.
That was going to be my next question.
It has never happened. So, for example, we forecasted 60 families a month at Wellington Fresh Stop, and we had 64. We were very close. And so I think we're getting better at this, but that's what it's about. I mean, farmers tell me, you give me a commitment, I'll grow it for you. Of course, we always have to then understand that this is not plastic and anything can happen. A freeze, etc.
So then what happens?
Then we scurry around. We have to go further away. We have to go to the produce auctions that are scattered around southern Indiana and Kentucky and do last-minute purchasing. But we always find food.
All as a volunteer. I mean, I think that's the other thing that kind of boggles my mind is no one's being paid for this.
That's right. So for the very first time this past May, I am being paid part-time as an executive director. So finally we were able to do that, but we don't have full-time staff. So yes, it is miraculous, and it just shows how much passion there is in Kentucky, in Louisville, for this connection between farmers and neighborhoods, and that people are really willing to put themselves out, their time, their money, toward this, and we're making it happen. I mean, we're on the map. We're in a lot of food magazines.
You're everywhere. I've been reading about your growing, your expansion, and that's really great. Well, I don't have much time. I was going to talk to you, and maybe I have to have you back to talk about an Atlantic story. It was June 20-something, where the author David Friedman talked about how junk food can end obesity. And he was making the argument that processed food, there's not very much scientific evidence that that's any more harmful than the wholesome food that costs more, that often wholesome food has just as much sugar, fat, carbohydrates as processed food. So real quickly, 10 seconds, can you give a rebuttal to why we really should focus on homegrown, good community garden food?
Yes, I would say that I'm more of the Michael Pollan camp. Eat what your grandmother used to eat and we'll all be okay if we can access it. And I think that fresh fruits and vegetables do a lot for your mind, body, and soul. And I'm concerned about the addictive qualities of the processed food and what it's doing to our children. So I would say you need to come to a Fresh Stop and taste a Kentucky tomato in the next few weeks, and you'll know. You
won't want another burger from some other fast food joint again,
you will not. You'll never turn back.
Never turn back. Well, he also mentions Michael Pollan in here, so I encourage everybody to read that article on The Atlantic. It's a good one. Thank you, Karen Moskowitz. It's always fun to have you on, and thank you for all the great work you're doing in Louisville. You can learn more about her by logging on to our website at ket.org/connections, and we'll see you next week.